Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Casual Chats. I'm Patricia.
And my name is Arun.
And we have been gone for quite a while, actually.
Yeah, so let's bring you up to speed. So we needed a vacation, so we ended up in America, and so we spent 2 weeks there. Then we had a massive heat wave here in the UK, and so the podcast studio effectively became, we just couldn't go into it because it was just so hot.
Right.
And we don't have air conditioning here in the UK,
no.
So like it was a non-starter. So unfortunately, sorry everybody that we delayed on this as well. And also there's going to be a bit of a delay to the Super Mario Brothers movie 1993 episode because we don't have Prime Video, and that's where it usually is. And so unfortunately right now we just until either we decide we're going to pick up the DVD or whatever, if a DVD even exists of Super Mario Brothers. It does. I mean, like, if we ever come across it, or if we ever get it donated to us or anything like that, we will cover it in a future video. But right now we actually are going to be moving on to another exciting property, which is He-Man and Masters of the Universe, which the Masters of the Universe movie is coming out fairly shortly on June 3rd.
Yeah, and we are really excited about this, and we talked about the 1987 adaptation of Masters of the Universe just a couple of months ago in honor of the trailer that just came out, but now, finally, the movie is going to be coming out, and we'll see which one is the better incarnation of the toy line and the 1983 series and the entire franchise.
By the way, we did talk about the 1980s version of Masters of the Universe, so if you want to check out that podcast, I'm sure Patricia will put a link to it somewhere, or basically just find it on the Old School Lane podcast, or find it on the Old School Lane YouTube channel.
Yeah, and also if you're interested in our discussions of She-Ra, which we haven't talked about the original She-Ra yet, but we have talked about the most recent incarnation of She-Ra on Dream Machine. If you're interested in that, then go listen to our recent Dream Machine episode.
Yeah, definitely. So we are going to focus on the 1983-1984 He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and so it's been an interesting legacy that I think that He-Man has sort of left in the cartoon nostalgia world, I guess you could say. Maybe for the better, maybe for the worst. But I think what we're going to do is with this podcast is that we're going to break down He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, have like a massive, like, honest discussion about it. And like, so, we're not going to go into the memes. We're not going to go into like, is He-Man LGBTQ or something like that.
No.
We're not going to do any of like, the stuff that you've seen on the internet of He-Man, and that's your idea of what you think He-Man and the Masters of the Universe is. We're going to talk about, by the way, we watched all, 173 episodes?
130.
130, I should say. So we watched 130 episodes of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. We watched them from start to finish.
Yes.
And so we are going to give you our honest opinion of the show because we have watched the entire thing again.
Yeah.
So.
At least for me, if you remember from almost a decade ago, that Kevin and I discussed about every single incarnation at the time of He-Man. We talked about the 1980s cartoon. We briefly talked about the 1990 cartoon. We talked about the movie, and we briefly talked about the 2002 Cartoon Network series, and that was pretty much it. We just basically gave our brief nostalgic look back on it. But now it's been a long time since that podcast, and I had a refresh of watching every single episode alongside with Aaron, and yeah, we're going to give you our honest opinions on it.
Yeah, and I mean, in my retrospect of, the He-Man franchise, I mean, like, I've never seen any other reincarnations of He-Man. The only one I'm familiar with, effectively, is the 1980s version of it, and so I'll be giving my view on that. But in regards to the modern, versions of He-Man, I can't really give you an opinion on it. Besides She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, because I've seen it.
Yeah, so, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm sorry for those who are interested in our thoughts of the 2002 Cartoon Network series, which I know a lot of people are huge fans of and they grew up with, and also the most recent He-Man cartoons, such as the two versions of it on Netflix, one of which was done by Kevin Smith. We have not seen those, so who knows? Maybe we'll watch it in the future.
Also, just another note as well, like, during this podcast, you might hear, like, some car noises or, like, some other random noises in this. We are in the last day of the UK heat wave at the moment, so you might, and the windows are all open and everything. So if you do hear something during this case of this podcast, we do sincerely apologize.
Yes, we sincerely apologize, especially since it's been super hot, and so we have to keep the windows open so that we can be able to function normally.
Exactly.
And we even had to bring our tiki cups so that we can be able...
ice cool tiki cups that we got here. So, cheers, Patricia.
Salud.
Mm-hmm. And for those of you listening to the podcast, we just took a sip.
All right, so yeah.
It's water, by the way. It's not alcohol. So
No. Anyway, so yeah, right before we discuss about the podcast discussion of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, we want to give a brief condolence to one of the co-creators of He-Man who recently passed away, and there was a memorial dedicated to him, and there was also a lot of condolences to all the people that were huge fans of He-Man, and so yeah, we want to be able to give our dues and respects for him.
Yeah, I mean, because it's really sad that he's never going to actually get to see the final product of like what the modern Masters of the Universe movie is going to be.
No.
And it would have been interesting to hear his thoughts on that, and the fact that he passed away only by a couple of weeks just before the premiere of this. It's so sad, and it would have been, mind you, we're probably going to get other reactions from people who worked on the Masters of the Universe project, back in the 1980s, the movie and that. I've been see what Dolph Lundgren's views are on the person who's going to be playing He-Man.
That'd be really interesting.
Yeah, so I want to see if he chirps up about it, but. Our condolences to everyone who's a fan of He-Man, and hopefully, the podcast we're going to do today will hopefully be a nice tribute to him.
Yeah, absolutely. So we pay our dues and respects over to Roger Sweet, one of the co-creators of He-Man.
Yeah. So, I think, beginning for me is that, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, it was on free-to-air television here in the UK, and also it was available on the syndicated, television stations that were going on across the United States.
Yes.
And, it was very difficult at the time, and this is the one thing I will give credit to Filmation. It's so difficult to get a syndicated cartoon show going on across the entire thing, because if you don't across syndication across the states, you really don't have anything. You just basically have a local show, if anything. So the fact that they managed to do this and also get international distribution as well, I mean, good on them. For what they effectively did. So, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, I mean, if anyone's seen the intro, I mean, we don't really need to explain it to you. There is Adam, Prince of Eternia, and also he has his sidekick, Cringer. And secret powers were revealed to him when he one day aloft his magic sword and he said, "By the power of Grayskull!" And then he basically becomes He-Man and he proclaims, "I have the power."
Yeah.
And when he points his sword at Cringer, and by the way, the origin story of Cringer is hilarious. I mean, when we'll get into that eventually in the show. But he points his sword at Cringer. He then turns into the mighty Battle Cat.
Yes.
And Prince Adam is He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe. And to tell you what, I'll give them credit for this. I mean, there's shows where they basically just show a bunch of shenanigans, and you have no idea what the show is about. And then you have to wait until you get into the episode to actually kind of figure, oh, hey, this is what this is about. But, credit to He-Man. They actually say, this is the main character, this is his sidekick, this is what happens when he holds his magic sword up, and this is what happens when Cringer turns into Battle Cat, and he is the mighty He-Man, and here's all his friends.
Yeah.
They explain, and also here's the villains at the end as well. And by the way that they give Skeletor, fade in of him just, cackling, that is the most brilliant intro of a villain, I think. That I think should have been the baseline of every other villain introduction, I think, after that, I thought. Because, the way that they introduce He-Man, I think, is brilliant. And, by the way, it's not one of those situations where it's they poured all the budget into the intro. No, it looked, the one thing I'll also give them credit for as well, that this is, I'm not going to say cheaply produced, but it was on a modest budget, I think you could say.
Let's be honest. Yeah. There was only a handful of animation studios at the time. You had Hanna-Barbera were still doing their stuff. You had Filmation, which was also doing a lot of their stuff too. And yeah, you had Hasbro, which was doing Transformers and various other things.
Even Warner Brothers, all they basically were doing at the time was taking all the cartoons that they showed in the theaters and just transforming them over to television.
Yeah.
That's the reason why we had the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner show and things like that.
Exactly, yeah.
So, if anything, animation was somewhat in short supply, I think, at that time. And, other studios were either doing cardboard cutout, carbon copy of, things over and over again, which, by the way, is one of the things that He-Man. Or two, they're basically just regurgitating. I mean, it's kind of hard to say regurgitating. They're basically just remastering, repackaging cartoons that were in the theater and then basically bring them out to television for syndicated broadcast. So that's basically what was happening.
Or C, the other option is that they would acquire other shows from other countries and bring it into America for the first time. That's how we got Danger Mouse. We got Count Duckula. We got Banana Man. We got The Wonderful World of David the Gnome. We also
got some animes as well because of that too. Like, you remember those weird 1980s animes? I mean, they were there. The Children's Channel here in the UK, played them all to hell. So, we got, a lot of, and also there was, the Smurfs as well.
The Smurfs,
And, also we got Asterix and Obelix as well. We got some very bizarre animation, during that time. And so, that made it to American and also British TV as well.
That's what it did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, He-Man was an interesting anomaly where it was based off of a toy line, which a lot of cartoons in the 80s were, but it was one of the most popular out of all of them. I mean, it was right up there with Transformers and G.I. Joe, in which everybody wanted to see the show just as much as they wanted the toys.
Yeah. And, it wasn't one of those things where it's if you remember with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it was the toys first and then the animated show came around.
It was the comics first.
Oh, comics first, then the toys, and then
the animated series.
Yeah, sorry. So, He-Man wasn't like that. There was going to be this cartoon show, and then after that, there was going to be, the idea was that there was going to be the massive toy line after that.
Right.
So, thankfully, this is not one of the situations where it's the only reason they're doing the show is because there's a toy line out before it's like that. Mm-hmm. So, I'm glad it bucks that trend. So, I guess, we get into the show itself. So, starting off with the aesthetic, you're introduced into the world of Eternia, which is, it is this blend between fantasy, sci-fi, and just, this, heroes of old, if you will. It has this really healthy mixture, which, really blends in very well. It's, it's very hard to kind of pull this off. It's kind of it's kind of remember Treasure Planet from Disney?
Sure.
And, it was sort of kind of hard to kind of blend in, hey, here's this kind of buccaneering, pirates that are all in space pirates, effectively. It's kind of hard to kind of blend those things. It's kind of hard to bring Treasure Island into a sci-fi thing. But the way that He-Man is his original concept. It's not based on anything else. But the way that they were able to mix in, sci-fi and fantasy and things like that, I think they pulled it off rather well. Mm-hmm. People make fun of it, because it kind of seems a bit ridiculous in nowadays. But in regards to the 80s, they really nailed the aesthetic, of what the 80s were about at the time.
Yeah, they had a lot of world building where you get to fully understand what Eternia is. You get to see what the castle has in terms of who rules it and all the different sets of locations and all the different people that live there and all the different creatures that live there, the plant life. And you get to be able to realize of how lived that Eternia is. It's a planet that is, going on for many, many decades, many, many centuries. And there will be some episodes in which they would explore all the ancient ruins of Eternia, and they would be learning about this stuff is ancient, and this is from long ago, and I don't even remember a lot of the stuff. These are from people who are archaeologists and whose living is studying this stuff, and they're learning something new every day by discovering what Eternia has to offer. So one of the things that He-Man has a lot going for is the world building and the world setup.
Yeah. So, the one thing that's also kind of goes to it is that, there's a lot of, not just, the world that's in it. The characters make this universe. Mm-hmm. And, you've got Prince Adam / He-Man, you've got Man-in-Arms, you've got Teela, you've got, the King and Queen, and you've got Orko, and then also you've got all the villains as well. The one, I think, villain, I think that, as we all know, makes this show is Skeletor.
Yeah, Skeletor makes this show.
Skeletor is probably, my favorite villain of, any other show. And the one thing about it is that Skeletor is, he's not just, ha ha ha, I'm evil. That is sort of kind of Skeletor.
Sure.
He's trying to find some sort of crazy scheme to in order to take over Eternia and rule over it and take over Castle Grayskull and get the power of Eternia and things like that. And he does what your stereotypical Saturday morning cartoon villain would do.
Yeah.
And but the one thing I'll say about it is that Skeletor is not somebody who, really kind of turns you off. Like, every time he's on screen, he's like, the way that he puts his presence on the screen, and, he does kind of come across as, like, quite hilarious to be around. Like, he has a lot of, like, other, villains that are, like, under him, which, he just constantly makes fun of. Because, they're either incompetent or they're, not very good at doing their jobs, or, like, they're lazy and things like that. And it's really incredible that, he's not just, get to work, all you minions and things like that. Like, he actually laments to the audience about, how miserable his life is. And, in a way, he kind of plays out like a sitcom sometimes. Like, I remember the time when, like, there's the scene where he just collapses on his table and just says, I'm surrounded by fools. Even the robots are smarter than you. It's like, I just love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
But why can't I join your gang?
Because you were a wimp scientist and you could be a wimp villain. It's the sorceress, you boob. They should call you Wimplash. Quiet, or I'll turn you into a suitcase. Just as I suspected. Hollow, you metal-munching moron. Why do I surround myself with fools? Even the robots are smarter than you. You overgrown alley cat. You pathetic pair of pitiful pinheads. You tin-tongued dolt. I'm talking about my patience, not my body. Dolts, half-wits, bunglers, brainless idiots. You couldn't even beat a motley group of gnomes. Get over here, you furry fool. Right, fools, you flea-bitten fur-brain. Because unlike you, Petros has a brain. I could write a book about what you don't know.
And you have his minions, which, a lot of them are pretty incompetent, like Beastman and Merman. But then you also have Evelyn, who is this evil sorceress who has a lot of these abilities, but also she's just as incompetent, even though that she claims that she's smarter than Skeletor and more powerful than him.
Well, I think her is ego, I think, like, where she probably thinks she should be running the show.
She kind of reminds me.
It's funny because there's times where, like, she, up and out threatens Skeletor to say, like, well, I am more powerful than you, and one day I will rule over Eternia, and you're basically serving to me.
Yeah.
And so I think for her, it's like, you could say that, she has, she's not very bright in herself, but I think that's more to the fact that she's just a diva, and, like, she looks out for number one, and that's her.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I think that's the reason why she comes across as a bit, not very bright. But funny enough, she is quite sharp sometimes and is quite smart. And funny enough, though, with Evil Lynn is that, we do get an episode, which I was very surprised at, actually, is that where she sort of lets her hair down and kind of, like, says, literally lets her hair down. She takes off her helmet, and, like, we kind of get, like, a bit of a backstory to her in one of the episodes.
Yes.
And we get to hear more about, who she is as a character. And so, she's not one-dimensional, which I thought that was very smart of them to do it. And this is the great thing about this show. And now, do you want to get, like, the critiques out of the way, I guess you could say, is, like, the cheap animation, not all the continuity errors, not all the animation is correct, you can see that, He-Man does the same punch,
they recycle the animation
again
a lot.
and again and again and again and again. And, it did get kind of boring at times seeing that, He-Man's punching a rock again, or he's lifting a rock, or, like, he's wrestling with Skeletor. And, these scenes do get played out time after time after time. But the one thing I think I'll give credit for is, which I think is the hidden gem out of all this, is actually the story of it.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they dedicate episodes to, our characters, like Man-at-Arms, like, even Teela has, like, a really amazing backstory.
She does.
And, do we give spoilers away in He-Man and the Master of the Universe, or should we just say that everyone kind of knows what we're talking about
at this
here?
point in time, the show has been around for almost 40 years.
Okay, spoilers, everybody.
Yes.
If you've not seen He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and if you haven't done yet, where have you been? But maybe some of our newer fans, on the 18 to 24 demographic, they probably haven't seen He-Man and the Masters of the
Fair
Universe.
enough, but I mean, there's a lot of newer incarnations that kind of tell us some more
so
story.
for the newer fans, if you've not seen He-Man and the Masters of the Universe yet, cut it off now, because we're going to go into massive spoilers.
Yeah, we're going to go into spoilers.
So, Teela is the sorceress's daughter.
Yes.
Which I thought that's quite incredible. Like, she was hatched from an egg, I guess. Like, just like, yeah.
I mean, no. I mean, the Falcon is just a disguise that she has.
She's like the baby was in a nest.
Well, yeah, that's
how did. Yeah. So anyway, that aside, so Tila is the sorceress's daughter,
Yes.
and then Man-at-Arms rescues Tila and then brings her up as his own daughter.
Yeah, because Merman was about to threaten where the sorceress was, and so the sorceress realizes that it's too dangerous to raise Tila, and so Man-at-Arms was there, and so he took her as his own, and Tila does not know that she is the sorceress's daughter, and the sorceress is waiting for the right time for Tila to know. That way, one day, Tila will become the new sorceress of Grayskull.
Yeah, and it would have been interesting if the show had actually continued, and the sorceress, they had to either write her off the show for whatever reason, and Tila then became the new sorceress. I mean, it's interesting to see, by the way, everybody, He-Man Masters of the Universe only goes for 2 seasons in this, even though there's like 130 episodes, which is crazy. And but it's funny because nowadays, if they did He-Man today, it probably would have been 5 seasons or something like that. They would have done it in 12 episode or 20 episode blocks,
right?
If you will, But this is 1980, and episodes went on for 65 episodes before they started doing seasons.
Yeah, exactly. They would either have 52 or 65, depending on how often they would be airing the episodes in syndication and how long that the runtime would be. So, as you guys know, 52 weeks are in a year, and so 52 episodes would be just enough, or 65 episodes would be the cutoff point because it will be just enough for people to watch an episode without repeating constantly over again.
Yeah. So, I mean, the scenes that, we get in the show, there's times where we're out in, these icy mountains, or we're in this, really hot, desert, or we're in, various other places. I guess Eternia is quite small because apparently they can just either walk or drive to wherever they need to go, I'm guessing. So,
either that or the vehicles are just really fast.
Maybe, I don't know, or maybe He-Man just kind of just runs to infinity. Mind you, he can throw things into space, so, I mean, wouldn't be surprised if, he can run as fast as Sonic the Hedgehog or the Flash.
I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be interesting, wouldn't it? But I digress. So, the variety that we get in our show, where it's not just adventures in the immediate area of the Kingdom of Eternia. We go to various other places across the planet, and also at some points we actually go into other galaxies and other dimensions as well.
Yeah.
So they're not afraid to say, okay, well, we know that some bits of it are becoming samey now, so we will now take, mind you, by the way, this isn't Josie on the Pussycats where they put them on a rocket and blast them off into space. Nothing like that. But, everything still takes place on, ends up being, happily ever after back in Eternia. But they're not afraid to, introduce, other worlds, or, even though Eternia itself is otherworldly, they are willing to push the boundaries with this show, which I think is great, because the one thing that's, where you're sort of kind of afraid of is that, well, Eternia is kind of, fanciful and, magical in itself, so let's just keep all the stories in there. No, they're not afraid to say, this is going to go into a different place.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that, as you guys know, Orko is from a completely different parallel world called Trala. And so sometimes we actually go to Trala. We go there to see his girlfriend. We go there to see his uncle. He has a few friends over there. And so from time to time, Trala would be a place to go to. Or maybe a completely different dimension that Skeletor would be going to so he can be able to retrieve a monster. Or maybe to drop off He-Man so that he can be able to put him far away and never see him again. And yeah, I mean, we get to see different planets. We get to see different dimensions and different worlds. And it keeps things interesting. It's not just Eternia constantly over and over again.
Yeah. So, I think with the music also as well, you will hear, the same sort of themes, the He-Man theme is a must for, a He-Man episode, if it is going to be He-Man centric. I mean, it's funny because, there's times where we get He-Man centric episodes and we get the He-Man theme, and then we get, the episodes that are, themed around other characters, and He-Man just happens to be on the side of it. So, where it doesn't always trumpet up He-Man, when he comes into the scene. It's if the particular side character happens to be the focus of that, they will actually give the side character that. Orko will have his moments,
yes.
and Man of Arms will have his moments, and Tila will have her moments, and things like that. Even the Queen gets her own moment as well, because the Queen was a lost astronaut who happened to discover the Kingdom of Eternia and then meet up with the future king, and then she became the Queen because of that.
That's right.
And but at one point she wasn't afraid to like suit up again and be able to take on Skeletor. So like it was we do get those moments where our side characters will like say oh this is my time to shine, and we'll do what needs to be done.
Yeah,
which is
and
great.
and also she was the only one that she was able to rescue everybody who was captured. Prince Adam, Man of Arms, Tila, the King, everybody was like locked up, and so she was the one who rescued Prince Adam. She rescued him alone, and then Adam was like questioning her, saying like, why did you rescue me out of everybody? And then she's like, oh, because I knew that you were capable of getting the help that you needed for us to be rescued. And yeah, it was like a little bit of a wink wink nudge nudge moment where we were thinking to ourselves, she knew.
Yeah, I think later on in the show, I think they were very smart with doing this. I think they realized that, He-Man Prince Adam's like sprinted in the other direction. He-Man's already suddenly come into view, and, Prince Adam's just been like, conveniently out of the way. I think the characters were catching on that this was going on. It's sort of kind of like, in Hey Arnold, where like Arnold and Helga's relationship, was sort of like, developing at that point, and everyone was sort of kind of catching on that, where Arnold and Helga had a thing for each other and things like that. So like it sort of developed in that way, where a side character would say like for Tila, for example, would say, oh yeah, I think I've got an idea that Prince Adam is He-Man, but would like only like kind of like say it like within not directly, but just like in third party.
Yeah.
And same thing with the Queen as well, and I think a few other characters also did those mentions as well. It's like it's interesting that Prince Adam is out of the way and He-Man suddenly turns up.
Yeah, exactly.
Wink wink.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
yeah, it's like we never see Prince Adam and He-Man in the same place.
Yeah, it's clearly Orko.
Speaking of which, only 3 people know about Prince Adam's identity as He-Man, and that's Orko, the Sorceress, and Man of Arms.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, and also they do explain this in the show, like why they know this, and like Man of Arms has always been like a trusted compatriot of Prince Adam, and also he's very trusted within the royal family, so he sort of knows most of the secrets anyway of what's going on, and also Orko is just this magical being from from Troller, and I probably imagine it wouldn't be too it's very hard to keep secrets away from Orko.
That's true.
I think in regard, and the Sorceress gave He-Man his power, so like
that makes sense.
It makes sense to that the Sorcerers know that Prince Adam. It's interesting though that the Sorcerers picked Prince Adam for this task, and it's funny because in a way Prince Adam sort of ends up kind of being a bit tragic in all of this, because he's in order to conceal the idea from everybody else that there's no possible way that he can't be He-Man, despite the fact that he has the same haircut and has basically the same facial features
and the same build.
And the same build.
Even though he's like 16.
It's funny because I guess maybe because of budget, maybe they didn't want to this is the thing about this. Do you notice that everyone in Eternia, the men are all like the same muscular build, and like all the women are like the same got the same, body build as well.
Yeah.
Like, if you notice, like, it seems that they didn't want... The one thing I would have done if it was me, if I was doing this, is that I would have made Prince Adam sort of, like, look, a lot smaller than He-Man, because, the idea of, like, the one thing that I was a bit critical of is that, you look at Prince Adam, and they probably him out to be quite useless, but, like, the guy just looks like he does, like, several hours in the gym every morning. And, like, he looks like he could handle himself. And by the way, they do make episodes where Prince Adam can handle himself, so I'm not suggesting that he can't in that sense, but the idea what I would have done if I was deciding between Prince Adam and He-Man is that I would have made Prince Adam a bit smaller than He-Man, and then so there would be virtually no real way to say, yeah, this can't be Prince Adam can't be He-Man because he doesn't have the same build as he does.
Yeah.
And the only reason he has the same build is because, the powers of Grayskull, make him into this super massive, invincible being.
Yeah, the only difference between Prince Adam and He-Man is that you have He-Man, who is slightly tan and he has a slightly darker hair, but other than that, they pretty much just look exactly the same.
God, can you imagine, like, imagine if his transformation wasn't like he had to, to sound like, it's like, sorry guys, I need to go to the beach. Just give me 1 second. It's like, like he has to get super tan, and then after that he become He-Man. Like, could you believe it?
Nah.
Anyway, I'm going off track here. So, the one thing that's interesting though is that the transformations of He-Man aren't really all that consistent, because like he transforms into He-Man, but then it looks like Man of Arms will like give him like certain gadgets. So like, does Prince Adam have those gadgets on him when he turns into He-Man, or like yeah, that's one inconsistency I find kind of weird, because it looks like he has like a bunch of like, he looks like he has a bad belt from the looks, like he has like, all these, gadgets like Batman has, like,
Yeah. He has
belt.
he has like a hook and line, and he has a lot of like weapons and other things, but like where does he keep them? Like, he doesn't have pockets. He wears underwear.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, no, he has a utility belt like around.
Yeah,
the
but
underwear,
like
if you will.
he wears a utility belt, but like how many things can he fit in the utility belt?
Apparently a lot from the looks of it. So
the utility belt is like the bag from Mary Poppins.
I guess so. He is He-Man, so like, he probably magics them, when he needs them. I guess.
I guess so.
Like, yeah. So it's funny because on He-Man, let's focus on that. The one thing that sort of makes Prince Adam sort of tragic in a way is that he has to sacrifice his own dignity in order to stop people from believing that he's He-Man.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
like he's perceived as lazy and somebody who's carefree and somebody who is devoid of.
He's a playboy, like all the girls chase after him, and like he just lounges around, and he plays with Cringer, and he's just like he is just a pretty boy who he just happens to be born into the family, and he takes very little responsibility unless he's pushed into doing it. And the reason why he does it is not because he doesn't care about his family, he doesn't care about the people of Eternia. It's because his secret identity is He-Man, and he has to throw everybody off the scent.
Yeah.
Because seeing how similar both He-Man and Prince Adam look to one another, good grief, I think you have to do a lot of we're throwing off at that point.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas, Teela always tells Prince Adam, is like, why can't you be more like He-Man? And I'm sure that he's really frustrated. It's like, I am He-Man.
I am He-Man, yeah.
But he can't say it because, he has to keep the secret, and he has to, not only, keep the secret for himself, but also for the sake of his family, for the sake of the kingdom, and for the sake of Grayskull as well, because Skeletor is constantly trying to take over it.
Yeah. And then we have his nemesis Skeletor, and so he's out in in Snake Mountain, and he is constantly not every single episode, but basically the vast majority of the episodes he's trying to either cause some havoc in Eternia, or he's trying to get hold of Castle Grayskull, he's trying to capture the sorceress, and it's funny because in some episodes he does somewhat succeed, but then he's just thwarted by He-Man, and it's funny because the one thing I would say about his minions, that like his whole circle of evil and everything, is that you seem to have there's villains that he can rely upon, and it's just happens to the fact that He-Man is so strong and so courageous that he can overcome whatever thrown. But then there's there is Beastman, and there's other ones where it's
you have Merman,
and there seem to be the ones that always get thwarted.
There was even one episode in which that Skeletor was so fed up with Beastman constantly failing, and he banished him, saying you're no longer with us.
Well, apparently from what everyone was saying in the show, is it wasn't Beastman's fault. Whatever happened to Skeletor happened to Skeletor, and Skeletor's wanted someone to blame. So Beastman happened to be there at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, and then he just let him back in anyway because he forgot why he was so angry about it. Which is it's just Skeletor, he's just so random, and it's just
he's we know that Skeletor can be really angry, but just give him some time to let off him some steam, and then you'll be back and it'll be like nothing ever happened.
Yeah, exactly, and it's funny because Skeletor, in a way, even though he's the mastermind behind all these schemes, but he doesn't think far enough to think, maybe He-Man might stop me or something like that. But if you really think about it, Skeletor isn't really all that bright anyway, because he's never come up with a scheme where He-Man hasn't thwarted him, or someone else hasn't outsmarted him in a way. So we talk about how incompetent all his villains are. Skeletor ain't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed himself.
No, not really. No.
Yeah, exactly. it's because there's times where he's even put himself in danger and he's had to be saved by He-Man. And like,
yeah, there was actually one episode in which he and He-Man had to work together so that they can be able to stop an evil that they both had to thwart against. And so, yeah, I mean, even Skeletor needs He-Man's help from time to time.
Yeah, exactly. And there actually are, so like, there's those team-up episodes, and like, it does create a bit of tension, actually, because, Skeletor, is all about himself, and he's going to do something to, thwart our good guys, our heroes. And so when we get those episodes where the villains have to and the He-Man and his friends have to call a truce in order to deal with whatever's going on, like there is that tension in the air where like you don't know where somewhere down the line Skeletor's just going to try and turn his back and everything.
Yeah.
But But it's funny because there's times where, villains will also get saved, but then they be kind of like, okay, well, I don't like He-Man, but at least I admit that I'm saved by He-Man in a way. So, like, it's funny because some of, like, say, for example, also, the villains will also throw He-Man a bone to say, like, because Beastman at one point was going to be replaced by, this other guy, and in one episode, and so he didn't want to be replaced, so he gave He-Man a tip of basically how to defeat this other guy, and basically they did it. And next thing Skeletor and Evil Lyn have to fight off a ship full of bees. Which,
gosh.
Yeah, there was that. So like, it's funny because I think the villains are also kind of aware of like their place in the food chain, and so they don't want to do anything that would jeopardize their place in the show. I guess you could say. So from time to time they will actually give He-Man a bit of a tip to like help them out, so to stop them from either being replaced or being destroyed.
That's true, yeah. Which is great because it just goes to show them that, yes, there are most of the times in which they're kind of like one-dimensional baddies and, kind of like, villains of the week and stuff like that. But, they do have some times in which they do have a little bit of development and a little bit of times in which they are able to help out the hero when needed.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because we're doing this episode, a couple of weeks removed from like when we completed all like watching all the episodes. It's annoying because we completed He-Man and the Masters of the Universe before we flew out to America, and so not all the episodes are fresh in my mind, but I do remember in some episodes there were just some laugh out loud moments where it's absolutely hilarious. And so I really wish I could recall them because, I would have like pointed out some examples of that. And like there's times where like Skeletor will just be outsmarted by a child or something like that. Or, just something like, hilarious would just happen to Skeletor and, his reaction to it would just be priceless. Mm-hmm. And, it's, I probably will want to go back around through all of them. Like, so, the one thing that you'll see is there's a YouTube video of like clips of like Skeletor insulting like all the villains, basically saying like, how they're bunglers and like they can't beat up a bunch of motley gnomes, and and then it's like him saying like I can write a book on the things you don't know. Like it's those scenes are hilarious, and I would say if you are going to check out He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, I mean like that's one of the reasons to check it out because some of the line deliveries and some of the punchlines are just so great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another thing that is pretty notable about He-Man and the Masters of the Universe is that in every episode, it always ends with He-Man or Skeletor, He-Man, Man of Arms, or Teela giving a message that would teach the kids about something like, stand up for what's wrong and don't do this, don't do that. And, for some people, they may think it's like a little bit preachy by today's standards.
No, I don't think so. I mean, some of the, for example, there was one episode which I thought was quite, now you mentioned that, there was the drugs episode, if you remember. There was a relative of Teela's who was like, he was taking these magic drugs and like, to make her feel good and like, make her feel brave. And if anything, it made her do reckless and dangerous things, which drugs do tend to do. So like, He-Man saying, magic drugs don't make your problems go away. That was a good message, mm-hmm. I thought. And then there was one about personal space, which I think obviously was important too. And, so there was some really, I think, and also like, there's crossing crossing the road, and like there's like learning to share, and helping out others and things like that. There were some actually really good messages in this. The only ones I would really be critical about is probably like the ones that kind of like just repeat the same message again and again. There were some episodes that kind of like had the same sort of like message.
Yeah.
Where for multiple episodes I thought okay, well maybe if one kid didn't want to see one episode, maybe they'll see this other episode which had the same message.
Yeah, I mean
I guess that's probably one reason why they did it. But I thought it was when we watched them all in sequence, it's like it becomes a bit samey when like the same sort of like make sure you don't steal things, or make sure you're honest and things like that. Like I think there was far too many of those messages.
There were,
I thought, and like to be honest, He-Man's always been about being honest and being truthful, and never stretching the truth, and helping out others and things like that. So like it makes sense for those messages to exist. But when you hear them like again and again and again in like and also some episodes didn't even have messages at all, if you notice. Like I think they just ran out of messages to kind of give to kids really in some episodes. So you notice that those were missing in one or two episodes in the show.
Yeah, I mean they just pretty much just had like a quick message about something else that had nothing to do with the episode, and then they just ended right there. And
I think there was an interesting episode that they did where it's like there's different like creatures within like species within Eternia, and you shouldn't discriminate against them because they happen to be a particular type of character or anything like that. For a very, very subtle anti-racism message, I thought that was a good message. I thought so I hope some kids got something out of that.
Yeah. Anyway, so one thing that I've noticed, especially around season 1, is that some of the best episodes of He-Man were written by Paul Dini.
Yeah, Paul Dini's a legend. Like every time Paul Dini came up, we kind of cheered because it's like, we know it's going to be a good episode of the show.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Paul Dini would later on co-create Batman the Animated Series alongside with Bruce Timm, and they would pretty much create what they would call the Tim Dini verse, or the Tim verse, whatever they call it, like around the 90s and 2000s, where a lot of the best DC animated series like Batman, Superman, Justice League were all done by them. And so they were praised for not only the writing and the animation, but the character development. And yeah, I mean, Paul Dini had to start somewhere. I mean, he started off with writing.
And he started off very well because like he was in one of the most legendary cartoons like you and I are talking about right now.
Yeah,
so like, a great place to start.
I mean, admittedly, if you were to look into like Paul Dini's blog, there were some times in which he kind of like regrets his time during He-Man because he felt it was too limited. So he just tried to push his writing skills to what was allowed on TV at the time.
Well, I mean, like also, I mean, how old was he at the time when he was doing those episodes?
I think he was like in his early 20s.
I mean, like he was getting a start. I mean, like but then obviously that it compelled him to then go above and beyond and then do Batman the Animated Series, and now that's hopefully that's going to be a legendary series that you and I are going to cover at some point.
Yeah.
But, I mean, like, if regards to Paul Dini and his work here, I mean, even if he did find his time there limiting, I mean, like, he did some very good work. I mean, like, those Paul Dini episodes were our favorite episodes of He-Man, effectively.
Yeah, at least in the first season. And, in the second season, he wasn't as involved as much.
Well, this is the thing, like, we started noticing that it was kind of like, guest writers that were kind of coming in. So, like, one person would, like, come in and, like, do an episode, but then sort of kind of missed the point of He-Man and missed the point of Skeletor. And, like, I remember those episodes not being very good.
Yeah.
Like, the ones that were, like, kind of, like, put the kids, like, front and center. They kind of remind me of like the Thunderbird episodes, like, that weren't very good.
Yeah, the Thunderbird episodes that you can tell were written specifically so they can cater to the kid audiences, and they were the worst episodes of the series.
Yeah, and so I noticed that when this is the thing about you'll notice in the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, that is that the Paul Dini episodes are good episodes. The episodes where they were like return writers that kind of like kept coming back again and again, those were sort of competent and are okay. But then when you there seems to be like this kind of like random person who like just seems to like write an episode, it's kind of like no, maybe it's your interpretation of He-Man, but it's not like what we've been used to when Paul Dini and like all the other writers who were are constant. I think they kind of had a better understanding of He-Man than I think that some of the guest writers did. In my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, you have like the stay powers of He-Man, like Larry DiTilio, and also in season 2 you had J. Michael Straczynski, who would become a major writer around season 2, and he was later on he would co-create Babylon 5, which is a major sci-fi series that was hugely popular around around the 90s. So yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense why, a lot of the people who were there from the beginning knew exactly how to write He-Man, and then the people who would just show up from time to time didn't exactly nail it.
I don't think I mean, I'm gonna say, this might end up being a controversial thing that might get, rinsed on in the comments, but I think some of the people who, kind of wrote one or two episodes of He-Man, I don't think really cared all that much. I think it was kind of for them, it's just, this is just a Saturday morning cartoon show, which I'm just gonna, and then they're gonna get paid, they're gonna pay me for this, writing this episode, and then I'm gonna go on my merry way. I think they knew that they weren't gonna get, a career, I think, out of writing these episodes, but, look at what Paul Dini did, look what some of the other characters, people went on to, do bigger and better shows. You can see even though they had very little to work with, they did the work that was needed to be done, and it came out so well.
Yeah. I guess while we're in the subject, I guess we can recommend some episodes for people to check out, because there's surprisingly a few of them that I do say, hey, check out this episode. It's actually really good. Yeah, so I guess, obviously the first episode, you should definitely check it out, because it's it brings you the stepping stones of what would have of the rest of the series, where there's a crystal that Skeletor's after, and then He-Man needs to go after it right before Skeletor gets it, and so you get introduced to all the characters, and then you have...
it's funny because, with some episodes sometimes, where they go with a slow burn, we're just going to condense it to, the core characters. That's how the Owl House starts it out. We're only going to deal with Luz, Ida, and we're going to deal with King, and then we're just going to throw in a couple of side characters and just get everybody into the show. Where there is He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, it doesn't do that. Where they try to introduce you as many people as possible, in the first 5 episodes, and even then they put even more characters in as we go along. So
yeah.
I mean, to be honest with you, I think when the toys started coming out, I think they realized that they wanted to release more toys, so I think that's the reason why they started answering more and more and more characters, hey kids, buy the toys. It's I think at one point it was getting a bit ridiculous. It's amazing. At the end of the whole show, I'd imagine they probably had nearly probably 60 or 70 characters. I would be I would say that it's less than 100, but I mean I'd hate to think how long if He-Man and the Masters of the Universe were still with us today. Could they meet to The Simpsons, where they have 1 million characters to play with?
Oh, geez.
Could you imagine?
That would be a lot.
Good grief.
Yeah. And literally, the second episode...
And they're all buff.
They're all massive beefcakes.
They're all massive beefcakes, yeah.
And literally in the second episode, that's where we get Teela's backstory. And you would think that, maybe they'll just let it burn, give it a nice slow burn so that we can be able to get acquainted with all these characters. No. It's right away you get to learn about who Teela is, and who her actual mother is, what's her background, and her going on this quest so she can be able to find out who she is, because all she's known all her life is that she was raised by men of arms, and she's been in the palace, and she is the main captain of the guard protecting Prince Adam, but she doesn't know anything other than that. She doesn't know where she originally came from. She doesn't know who her parents are, and so she goes on this quest so she can be able to find out. And then when she does eventually find out that the sorceress is her mother, unfortunately, she has to be wiped completely with her memory, because she's not supposed to know about that until she's ready.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder about He-Man, because we've just had this conversation about how in depth our characters are, how in depth the world is, how it's all built together. Okay, it's the presentation isn't great, but I wonder if they actually did try to have a good go of saying, okay, we know the 6 to 11 demographic is watching, but I think they also were kind of aware that the parents were also in the room as well. So I think it's kind of funny, because they seem to just give them these tiny little nuggets for them to hold on to, getting involved in Teela's backstory, getting involved in the adventure of how other characters feel in all of this, going through all the emotions of either happiness or sadness or loss or anything like that. It kind of makes me wonder, were they aware that maybe they were trying to make this more of a family show, really, rather than just kind of a silly kids show that was going to be be like, on Saturday mornings, where the kids are going to be up in front of the TV and the parents are still asleep.
Well,
like,
I mean, I wouldn't be, I wouldn't,
wonder.
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised considering that if like around a few years later, where Ronald Reagan was making a speech about how a lot of kids shows were being manipulated to having them, buy toys and having the parents.
I mean, as much as we hate Ronald Reagan, he wasn't wrong in that.
Like, I mean, that's how the Kids Act happened around the 80s, where they were focusing a lot more on education, and there was a lot less of that. And then the 90s had the Television Act, and go listen to our Beetlejuice podcast to learn more information about that, where they basically focus a lot more on edutainment, which was basically kids shows that were focusing a lot more on education and a lot less on distributing and promoting the newest toy. And so I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if with probably like preventing the backlash of a lot of cartoons that were like focusing on getting the newest toys. I guess maybe let's mix up the story a little bit so that it can be interesting to make it not look like that.
Yeah. So I think in where we want to go next with this is that.
Well, I mean, I have some other episodes I want to recommend.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So I mean, the episode in which Tila and Evelyn paired up together and having to set aside their differences was actually really great. Having to see them going through a situation where they were tied up and they had to work together so that they can be able to free themselves. And I guess another one that is almost as similar is that He-Man and Skeletor also had to work together to coincide with their differences.
Focusing on Tila and Evelyn, I mean, it's funny because, they've been such enemies for such a long time. And then when you put them in a situation where, where they, where literally, you see Evelyn sort of kind of let her guard down. She takes her helmet off and, you see, she has, she has white hair and everything. And she, talks openly about, how she feels about things.
Yeah,
and it's funny because, those are the episodes that I like.
Yeah, and guess who wrote that episode?
Paul Dini.
Paul Dini.
Yeah, exactly. He understood characters, and you can see that. The one thing I'll say about Paul Dini, I know we go on about him all the time, is that if you really want to see prototypes of where he was going to go with Batman the Animated Series, you should watch some He-Man episodes. You really should, because we get to understand more of our characters, more of our world, and more about what's going on around us. In Paul Dini's He-Man, and so good on him for doing that. I mean, I would say here's one thing I would say. I don't know if you would agree with me, Omar. I feel I got more out of the Tila Evelyn sort of back and forth than I did out of the He-Man and Skeletor.
Well,
He-Man and Skeletor.
Well, there was a reason why is because Paul Dini didn't work on the He-Man Skeletor discussion. It was somebody else, and you can definitely tell that it. I mean, it funny enough, it came out short. That episode.
But even if Paul Dini did write that, I mean, could you really argue that they could have the same chemistry as the other two?
No, I guess you do have a point, but
I mean, it's not kind of you see what Adult Swim do kind of with Harvey Birdman and you could have two characters that totally out of context of the show, and then they're sitting in a bar or something like that, and He-Man's having a drink, and then Skeletor kind of pulls up and they have sort of a man-to-man, heart-to-heart talk, just for comedic value about what's happened in the past and everything like that. But I mean, you can't really do that with He-Man and Skeletor in the context of the show. You probably could do that with in the context of Tila and Evelyn because we've seen it.
Yes.
But I don't think you can get the same chemistry. I don't think out of He-Man and Skeletor, at least in my opinion, because they're just so biometrically opposed to one another.
Yeah.
You've got He-Man, who is the strong, heroic, do all good, and eat your vitamins, say your prayers, brother. I know there's He-Man and Hulk Hogan, but and then you've got Skeletor, who is dark, evil, nasty, lives in a massive, mountain cave that has creepy crawlies everywhere, and he doesn't even know which ones are which, what other species are which. He's got all, you got two characters who are totally different from one another. I mean, there are some situations where you can get two different characters to interact with one another, and you can get a fun exchange. But I don't think you can. I mean, besides being adversarial between He-Man and Skeletor, I don't think you can do kind of like a buddy up kind of thing with these two characters.
No,
at least in my opinion.
No,
anyway.
Not really. I mean, I guess you do have a point in which, even though they're the complete opposites, it's not like they're ever going to be buddies or best friends or anything like that. Yeah, another episode that Aaron and I were really surprised when we first saw this, where Skeletor and another sorcerer that he was working with, they were in this village, and that sorcerer turned into one of the local people, and it made it look like He-Man accidentally killed him, and so He-Man decides to
Give up his power.
Give up his power.
That was such a. We saw the thumbnail for this episode on YouTube, and I looked and I thought, oh wow, like this is going to be a pretty deep episode. And it is pretty deep. Like, He-Man thinks he's accidentally killed somebody. He didn't mean it, but he then decides that because of that, he doesn't feel like he's responsible for that power anymore. But, funny enough, like, you've seen those episodes of those shows where, like, they frame the good guy for, like, doing some sort of, like, wicked act, and then everyone immediately turns on him. This doesn't happen in this episode. No. Man-at-Arms tries to talk him out of it. Teela tries to talk him out of it. Everybody tries to talk him out of it. The sorceress tried to talk him out of it, but then she, accepts that this is going to have to be the way, because that's how Prince Adam feels about this.
If it wasn't for Orko listening in on Skeletor's discussion on what happened, I mean, Prince Adam would never be He-Man.
It's funny because Orko is portrayed, I think, in the worst episodes as, like, your generic comic relief character.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason
to save his life.
There's a reason why Orko has become the butt of everybody's joke. Even Kevin Smith himself hates Orko.
Yeah, I know, but funny enough, like in the episodes where they actually make Orko useful, and the episodes where they give Orko something constructive to do, or like be something really important, within the plot factor. Like, Orko comes across as a really good character. Like, he sort of comes across as kind of like Olaf in Disney's Frozen, where, like, you expect these characters to, like, be loud and outrageous and things like that. But no, like, obviously in Frozen 2, it's a different kind of, sort of act. But in the first movie, like, he comes across as just, this kind and, gentle snowman. And Orko, when you write him properly, he comes across as, like, this giant, sincere character, and unfortunately it's because he's been badly written in so many other not so great episodes of He-Man. That's the reason why he has the reputation that he has, which I think is unfair.
Yeah, I mean, there are some episodes in which Orko does stand very tall because he is the most powerful, magician in Trolla, but he lives in Eternia where his magic doesn't work very well, and it blows up in his face, literally, and there's always an inside joke every single episode in which that Man-of-Arms is working on something, and then Orko tries to help him out, and then it literally just blows up in his face, and Man-of-Arms is just so pissed off at Orko, saying, go away and leave me alone, and then Orko feels really bad about it, and he just sees himself as completely useless. There was actually an episode in which it was the first time in which they hand over to Trolla, and he meets up with a girl companion, and she gives him this really nice sentiment towards Orko, saying like, oh, I've heard a lot about you. You have a reputation of being the greatest magician that ever happened in Trolla, and she becomes a reoccurring character after that, and she becomes his girlfriend. And it's apparently, according to what we see for Trollans, is that the only time in which they reveal their face is if they, fall in love with somebody, and it's the equivalent of proposing to someone saying, would you marry me? Or would you be with me for the rest of your life? And so we never get to see their faces, but it's actually interesting because we get to know a little bit about the lore about Trolla.
I mean, when I thought, the reason you can't see their faces, I thought it was kind of the same reason why you don't see, the face of the dog in Mighty Man in Yuck, because, he lives up his doghouse and, he's just that ugly that he just scares the hell out of everybody. I thought that was a reason for it. So to have this now is I wonder that's where they got the idea from.
I don't know.
Because Mighty Man and Yuck, I think, came out before He-Man and Masters of the Universe. I might be wrong about that. I think so, but it's I thought that was the reason why no one saw their faces, because they're not that nice to look at. But maybe I might be right still about that. I don't know. But it's still kind of sweet that that's their idea of mind you, what happens when they're born? Do they have to when the baby Orko comes out, do they have to throw a cloth over the face? No, we're not supposed to see her face, or is it okay to see kids' faces before they grow up?
I have no idea how.
Yeah,
it works.
How does that work in?
Yeah, how do Trollans when do Trollans put on their masks to prevent from people from actually seeing them? Maybe they explained it in the comics, maybe it's in the lore Bible or something like that, but I have no idea.
Can you imagine you're in Trolla, a guy runs in saying, officer, this Trolla has his balls hanging out, is he showing his face? Well, no, it's like, oh, move along.
Anyway, but the 2 episodes focusing on Queen Marlena, where the 2 astronauts came over to Eternia, and the one where we actually get to see Queen Marlena actually rescue the people of Eternia who were captured. I mean, those were actually really great episodes.
Yeah, they were, and this is the great thing about it is that there's the rescue episodes are also it's funny because Skeletor will capture somebody or someone will capture somebody, and you do think that the hero's going to save the day, but it does actually give you some intrigue of exactly how they're going to do it, and so there will be this kind of He-Man can't always rely on his strength to do stuff. He needs to use his head as well, and in fact, there's even one episode where he goes blind, and he has to rely on the feelings around him to be able to escape out of the peril that he finds himself in, and he has to rely on another blind person to help him out.
Yeah, that's probably one of the very few times in which having a kid alongside with He-Man actually worked.
Yeah, exactly, and it could have been anybody really. Rather, I think a kid was probably more relatable. I think in that situation because obviously you wouldn't expect that this child would be able to get out of the situation, but he can.
Well, if
anything, it kind of makes it more extraordinary.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is definitely over 30 years before Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender came out to be, where you have a blind character who is very capable of knowing their surroundings through smell and through touch and through
it's
feeling.
Interesting because we have Mecha Neck who obviously can have an extendable neck, and then you have Ram Man who can ram things with the top of his head, and then you have various other characters as well, you have Buzz Off, or he's a human bee, and they have all these fantastical powers. And it's very interesting that we didn't have our own version of Toph in this show. Where someone is blind, but they could, they have other powers that they can call upon in order to, be able to fight their battles.
Yeah, it's the complete opposite, where there's a Cyclops character that works alongside with Skeletor, who has different types of vision.
Yeah, but that's not the blind character, is it?
No, it's not a blind character.
Apparently, it's funny with the Cyclops character is that apparently, I've not read further into it. Apparently, this guy has a really tragic backstory that is because that's actually because of Skeletor. Apparently, that's in the comics, really, and not in the show. So.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
By the way, I think we should have said that to everybody. I mean, someone's going to say, well, there was the He-Man comics, and there's all the stuff like that. We've not seen the He-Man comics. We've only just seen the show.
Yeah,
so.
we haven't read any of them, and there's a lot of them, by the way.
Yeah, there is.
There's a ton of them. And we haven't.
Well, I mean, it makes sense to have He-Man in comic book form because there's so much you could have done with it.
Yeah.
So I mean, so that doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
Right. Yeah. But unfortunately, we haven't read it. Maybe we will in the future, but in the meanwhile, we're just relying on the show specifically. I guess since we're talking about episodes, we need to bring up the Cringer Battle Cat origin episode.
I mean, the idea is just that Cringer accidentally interrupted He-Man during his transformation process, and He-Man just accidentally just points his sword at him and turns him into Battle Cat.
That's literally it. That's literally it.
It's funny because I thought, oh wow, we're going to learn about the origins of Battle Cat, the heroic sidekick of He-Man, and it just turns out it was a complete fluke.
Oops.
Whoopsie doodle.
SpaghettiOs.
He's a Battle Cat now. Okay, might as well use him. Up and away. God. It's just,
Oh, boy.
I'm surprised Peter doesn't, criticize He-Man for the fact that he's riding on top of his cat.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, there were several episodes where you got to see Granomir the dragon, and he was actually pretty cool.
Yeah, it's funny because, thought he was just going to be a massive stick in the mud the entire time, but no, there's episodes where he starts to... It's funny because I think this is a good example of, having a character who thinks, the worst of everybody and, hides in a hole, for the rest of his days. But then he realizes actually there are some good in people, and he will actually come out and not only to accept them as people who lives amongst them, but also we're going towards defending them as well. Mm-hmm. Which Granomir in this show I think is a great example of that.
Yeah.
So because we've had characters like this in the past, but Granomir stands out for me.
Yeah, for sure. And the fact that we get to see him several times and slowly he starts accepting humanity, whereas before he was just offside with all the other dragons, and we only have until when He-Man starts coming in and begging Granomir to help him out with a task, and then he eventually starts trusting He-Man, and then eventually he starts trusting Man of Arms, and then he trusts Orko, and then
remember there was that dragon who was trying to take over the land of the dragons, and Granomir wasn't gonna have anything of it because he knew he was a liar, so he took him on in battle for the sake of humanity and for the sake of the whole world.
Well, yeah, and also the fact that he believed that dragon at first, and he was saying that, oh, it was humanity that was, stealing all of these things. And so they attacked a village and completely destroyed it, maybe even killed a few people. And then Granamir was like, oh man, I need to right the wrongs that I did. I need to make up for my sins. And so I'm going to help rebuild this village. I'm going to make it up to the peoples whose lives I completely ruined. So at least he's able to take accountability.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So I think, that's been a good thing in itself. And
Yeah.
I think the one thing I will say about this, even like the most powerful characters in this show, pending that they're not villains, will sit down and accept, oh yeah, I have some responsibility to this. Like, there's characters that we meet who like have these powers, and it's not the fact that they're evil or anything like that. They just happen to be recluses because they've been made fun of, or like they've been ostracized from like their communities. But they just want to be accepted for who they are, and they're very powerful episodes, I have to say. And I think when those were going down, I think that was great messaging, I think, for a lot of people, and great character work as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's those things as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, are there any episodes that you want to recommend for people?
I mean, again, annoyingly, when we do these episodes, I tend to say to Patricia, can we do them right after we're done with this, because the problem is that a few weeks separated, and then I've sort of kind of forgotten what episode is what.
All right. Well,
so,
I mean, I'll
unfortunately, that's
okay. Well, admittedly, I wasn't a big fan of the episodes that involve with those little people. I don't know. I mean, I get it that it's supposed to expand the world, and you have the first character that we see in the show is Squinch.
Oh, those gnome episodes.
Yeah,
that we had. Yeah, I didn't like those episodes. I didn't really care for those, to be honest. But it's funny because those creatures. I mean, you looked at them and they look like they belong in the world of the Smurfs, really, rather than the world of He-Man.
Yeah, it looks like it looks like we're in the world of Willow.
Yeah, it's funny because they're the only characters I would say you can't really say belong in the He-Man universe. I mean, everything else sticks.
Yeah,
but,
and then there were some episodes in which you had here comes Prince Adam's cousin, or here comes this character who's visiting the palace for the first time, and they turn out to be the most spoiled, annoying brats possible.
Exactly,
and it just weighs it down so bad.
They're the people who think that they're actually really massively heroic, and they're actually not.
Oh yeah. There's this one character who claims to be He-Man, and he decides to pretend to be He-Man so that he can be able to impress his girlfriend. And then it turns out, no, when he's in the actual face of danger, he completely chickens out.
Exactly, and it's funny because I was wondering when we were going to get the fake He-Man episode, and we actually got it. And actually, in actual fact, we actually did get a quote unquote fake He-Man episode as well, because Skeletor manages to capture the magic of Castle Grayskull and create a fake He-Man out of it.
Yes.
And apparently, from what I understand, when they created the Faker character, apparently he was supposed to appear, in other episodes that apparently were scrapped. So, there was one episode, I think, that they did find, which was a lost episode, which they were trying to, I think fans were trying to recreate, which would basically be Skeletor creating the Faker character, and he actually looked like an evil version of He-Man.
Yeah.
So, there's some clips on YouTube on that, by the way, so if you want to track them down.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It almost sounds very similar to when the final episode of the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon was never made, and then the audio of it was available on DVD, and so fans decided that they were going to animate the project themselves. And so, yeah, it's very commendable of what fans are capable of doing. So if they're able to do a complete version of that lost episode, I would love to see it myself.
Yeah, exactly. So it's funny because when fans discover lost media, they really don't want it to be lost. They really want it to be. One thing I'm hoping that one day will happen. And by the way, we're kind of switching gears a little bit. It's like there's the last episode of the Angry Beavers.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
I hope one day someone edits that and turns that into the lost episode. That'd be kind of fun to watch.
That would be a lot of fun to watch. Yeah. So trying to think about anything else that we can cover. So
so here's the thing about this, because we're talking about this, and in a couple of days' time, we're actually going to be seeing Masters of the Universe. So, and funny enough, in the final trailer, they actually made references to the 1980s He-Man cartoon. So, but mind you, the thing is with this new He-Man that's coming out, it looks rather serious. I mean, I get Jared Leto's going to be Skeletor in this, which kind of makes me feel a bit, worried a little bit about this. But I'm gonna go into it with an open mind at least.
I mean, to be fair, a lot of the newer incarnations of He-Man have gotten a lot more serious. The 2002 Cartoon Network series is a lot more serious, and even He-Man Masters of the Universe Revelation, the Kevin Smith project, is a lot more serious and a lot more darker.
Yeah, but why? Like, the one thing that we all remember so fondly is the 1980s version, is because it's such a fun show, and I actually would like to, you know what, I would happily be surprised if, Jared Leto comes up on screen and basically just, starts cracking jokes about, like, how incompetent everybody is around him, and, and then just gets, like, serious from time to time. If he does that, and, like, we have a really fun time with Jared Leto, then fair enough, he does some justice for Skeletor, but, if that doesn't end up being the case, I just want to see a version of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe in movie form where it's just a fun, it knows it's silly, it knows it's over the top. Like, I just want to see that. Like, look at the Barbie movie, for example. I mean, I'm not saying that He-Man should be like the Barbie movie or anything like that, but, you had some fun with the Barbie movie because it knew it wasn't taking itself seriously, and it knew, what it was.
Sure.
It wasn't going to be, the entire Barbie story, if you will. Like, it was going to be some sort of zany adventure, and I think, they pulled with Margot Robbie, they pulled it off very well. I want them to do sort of like, a sort of version of that, where, look, it knows it's, based off a campy 80s, cartoon show, and it knows it's not, it's a younger audience, and, like, they can poke some fun at that. Like, I want to see that version of Masters of the Universe, but here we are again doing, like, a serious story. Thankfully, it's not going to include in, like, a teenage grief or anything like that, like it did in the 1980s version. It doesn't look like any of that's going to be going on. But good grief, I'm really hoping that, what we're going to get is something fun. And that's what I want to have with Masters of the Universe. I want this to be fun.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? I mean, we only just saw bits and pieces of all the trailers, and we kind of got a gist of what it's going to be, but it won't be until we finally see the movie for ourselves to finally figure out if it's leaning towards a more serious direction, if it's leaning more towards a silly direction, or if it's a mixture of both.
Yeah, we'll find out soon enough.
Yeah, we'll find out soon enough.
Well, in regards to He-Man and Masters, by the way, we're talking to an hour and 10 minutes nearly of He-Man and Masters of the Universe. I mean, in regards to this cartoon show, like, it remains, a part of my childhood, and, we all have fond memories of it. Yes, there's the memes. Of course, there's the memes. But, the one thing that, funny enough, that will stand out for me is, funny enough, not He-Man. Like, He-Man is, a heroic character. But, I mean, like, compared to, like, all the other heroic characters that we have nowadays, I mean, like, who are big and muscular and, like, have the talking points and everything like that, He-Man really himself doesn't really stand out from the crowd. We've had loads of these people now, like, whether they're heroes or villains. The one person that stands out for me, too, is that always will stand out for me is Skeletor.
Yeah.
Like, Skeletor makes this show.
He does, actually.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why that Skeletor is in all the memes. There's a reason why Skeletor is in that new Raid Shadow Legends game. There's a reason why Skeletor just seems to have a lot of snippets on YouTube shorts where some guy is putting together all these, like, jokes about involving with Skeletor and being the voiceover. I mean, Skeletor is the character that a lot of people have fun with, and a lot of people can be able to make jokes around or can be really serious with. I mean, Skeletor makes He-Man for a lot of people. I mean, there's a t-shirt that Aaron is wearing that has Skeletor in it. So
I love this shirt, by the way.
Yeah, I got it for him while we were in America doing
and I love it for her.
Yeah. My mom and I went to do some shopping, and so I just so happened to find the shirt, and I had to pick it up for him.
Yeah, definitely. So, after talking through this entire show for nearly an hour, I mean, for over an hour, I guess we could say, I mean, I'm ready to rate it,
okay.
If you are. So,
let's do it.
Here's the thing about this. I mean, like, great characters, great story, great setup, and okay. I mean, the one thing that definitely weighs it down, unfortunately, is its presentation and its overuse of, like, the same animation over and over again. The overuse of music, the overuse of, like, just, the presentation over and over, even though they try and make it, like, different from time to time. Not all the characters land, but, at least the main characters do. And and also, like, they're trying to vary it out with, like, different villains and everything like that. So they're trying to give it some variety. I'm gonna say, I'm going to say 7.5 out of 10.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
7.5 out of 10. Yeah, that just sounds about right. Where a lot of the highlights of the show, such as the characters, the set pieces, those are all great. But you do have a lot of things that is weighing it down, like inconsistencies with its storytelling depending on who's writing it. And there's a lot of characters that are added into it that don't really make it any better. It just kind of like weighs it down.
Also, I mean, like, in regards to the Saturday morning cartoon show, I mean, like, it was good for its time, but, reviewing this now in 2026, I mean, like, well, you and I have, like, been through such, a huge library of, like, other cartoon shows that came after that. And
yes.
So, I mean, in regards to, like, in the library of, like, other cartoon shows, I mean, like, there's been a lot of fantasy and there's been a lot of, like, interdimensional adventures and things like that, and inside and outside this genre. And we can look fondly, nostalgically at He-Man and the Master of the Universe, but let's be honest about this. I mean, like, there's other media that's existed, like, between the 90s and the 2010s. I think that stand up far more, and I think deserve far more accolades than, unfortunately, He-Man and the Master of the Universe.
Yeah,
do.
I mean,
and I'm just being honest here.
Yeah, I mean honest too. I mean, there's even with like the incarnation of He-Man, there's a lot better out there that is not this version. We enjoyed She-Ra, Princess of Power, very much so when we first saw it on Netflix not too long ago.
I mean, like, compare it to Amphibia, The Owl House, and Gravity Falls. I mean, like, to be honest with you, I mean, like, okay, they're different setups and everything. I totally get that, but you feel a bit more involved in the adventure with those, and also those go into a linear adventure as we know, and whether it's He-Man, it's just kind of like an episode and we're done. You know what I mean? Like, everything just resets.
Yeah.
At the very end of the episode, like, it's very rare that we ever get to a to be continued and we have to move on to the second episode. Even in the two-parter episodes, I mean, we sort of have a bit of a wrap up, towards the end of the episode anyway, and we're just kind of continue on to another episode that's sort of a conjoined to the episode.
Yeah,
if you will.
There was only very few chances of us enjoying the two-parters where there was actually a two-parter where He-Man, Man of Arms, and the Archaeologist discover an ancient tomb, and then you would think, okay, that sounds really interesting, and then literally you solve the problem in part one, and it's like, oh, part two, we're not going to go inside the tomb, and it's like, it doesn't feel like, a cliffhanger, and it gets really exciting.
Yeah, the one other thing as well, which I thought the episode, the problem with the problem with Power, I thought should have been a two-parter, because imagine you get to the point where He-Man gives up his powers and he will be permanently Prince Adam because he's returned his powers to Castle Grayskull, and then you leave it to be continued at that point, and but Orko still knows the secrets. It's like, oh my god, what's going to happen in the second episode? That would have been a great cliffhanger for to be for a two-parter episode.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, but they didn't do it.
Nope,
so
they didn't.
Maybe they didn't want to upset the kids. Maybe that's the reason why they didn't want to do it.
Anyway, but yeah, 7.5 out of 10 sounds about right. Where, I mean, the stuff that people remember it fondly for, it's remembered for a reason. But yeah, we've come a long way since He-Man first came out in 1983, where we've had a lot more better shows that came out since then that have similar premises and similar characters. And like I said earlier, that there are better versions of the story of He-Man that came out decades later that you can watch and get just the same gist of it, but is able to elevate it so much more. So yeah, I would say, if you are interested in watching it, I do recommend it, but just, err with the side of caution that there are some things that don't hold up to today's standards, and there are going to be some slow episodes. There's going to be a lot of repetition with the animation and the music, and a lot of the additional characters are not that great. So yeah, I mean, take the good with the bad. That's what I'll say about it.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's all we got to write home about in regards to He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and no doubt we will be bringing you a special episode when we finally go see Masters of the Universe 2026.
Yes, and so thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Let us know in the comments below about your thoughts of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe 1983. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Who's your favorite character? What's your favorite episode? And yeah, let us know if you're going to go watch Masters of the Universe 2026 this coming week. So that's it. Hope until we see you in the next one. Take care and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.